Hi, this is Paul from InsideTheSun.com. In today's video, I'm talking about Parans and locational astrology. This is sort of an introduction to how they work, what they are, and what they do. It's a pretty useful video just to get a jump start on understanding more deeply about Parans in general because they do play such an important and powerful role in locational astrology in choosing certain locations you want to live in or experience. So in other videos, I'm going to do more interpretation of specific parans, but in this one, I just sort of want to break down what a paran is and how we can use it. So, without further ado, please enjoy. Okay, so here we are with the map, and what we are trying to figure out today is what are parans, how are they calculated, and what do they do? So, with this map, we're going to help illustrate that by, for one, looking at the horizontal lines that are all parallel to one another going across the map, and those themselves are the parans. And those are areas where there's a very strong influence of two planets that at some point came together both on angles at the same moment of time and space, and therefore created a very strong energy of combining those two planets in a latitudinal sense all around the globe. So you can follow a paran straight across the globe like this, all the way around the Earth. And for instance, this one where my cursor is on, are all at 42 degrees north, 15 minutes. So if you follow that latitude anywhere across the globe, you'll be feeling that paran's energy, which in this case is Saturn and Neptune. So going down the list here, we can see all these different paran combinations. There are 13 planets that I use, planetary bodies that I use when I look at charts. So I have the two luminaries, the sun and the moon, the 5 elemental planets, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. We have the 3 outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. We also have a couple asteroids. I use Ceres and Chiron, and of course the nodes, but the nodes are always opposite one another, so they count as one body. So that's 13 planetary bodies, and when we combine them all, it creates a total of 78 possible combinations. So the way I use it, there are 78 possible combinations of parans that can be, seen on the chart. But beyond that, oftentimes you'll see the same combination pop up in multiple spots. Like here we have Sun Uranus, and right up here we have Sun Uranus again. That's because at different places on the map around the globe at this moment in time, those two planets were on angles at the same time, but maybe in different locations. Okay, so to help illustrate what that means and how they are formed in different locations on the map, we can take a look at that here. Because from this view, there's actually 4 of them that I see. We have one right here. This is Pluto Moon. Right here we have Sun Chiron. Down below it we have Sun Uranus. And up here we have Saturn Uranus. So the way it works is over here in the Pacific Ocean, at this moment in time, this is August 3rd, 1977 at 11:48 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time. This just happens to be Tom Brady's chart just for fun. But we could look at any chart to see how these work. So at that moment in time, on August 3rd, when he was born, right here in the Pacific Ocean, Pluto was exactly on the ascendant and Moon was exactly on the descendant, but only at this longitude, because you could see how they're curved. Because the Earth is curved, the ascendant and the descendant sort of create this curved effect, depending on your longitude of how north or south you are above the equator, depends on where the ascendant and descendant actually occur. So that's why they are curved. So right here at this coordinate, if we pulled up a relocation chart to this coordinate here in the Pacific Ocean, Pluto would be on the ascendant and Moon would be on the descendant. So over here, we can look at another example. So right here in these middle states in the southern part of Kansas, Sun was directly overhead in the midheaven at this time. So right here in the southern part of Kansas, while the sun was directly overhead, Chiron was exactly on the descendant. And then further south of that, where the sun is still directly overhead in the midheaven, right here in this small town in Texas, we can see that Uranus was on the ascendant at the same moment. So that's how they sort of work and how they are formed. So all these other Parans that we see, somewhere on the globe, those two planets formed a combination where they were both on the angle at the same moment, and thus created a strong band of energy of those two planets coming together and creating that effect all around the globe. Okay, so the next thing I want to look at is Tom Brady's relocation chart for, this area here in Texas to show you what it looks like on the chart. Okay, so here's Tom Brady's natal chart. We will switch it to his relocation chart in Rock Springs, Texas, which is where that small town in Texas was that we saw the Paran being formed. And visually on the chart, here we see Uranus right on the ascendant, 14 degrees, and the sun right here in the midheaven at 17 degrees. When the Paran actually comes together, it's the exact degree and minute of the ascendant, midheaven, descendant, or IC. It's one of the four angles that creates that strong, powerful energy for that planet. So you might say, well, it's a little off. It's like not exactly on the exact degree. There's a couple reasons for that, looking at it from this chart. One is because it was hard to get the exact coordinate when finding this town. But also, Parans are formed by the planet's in mundo position, which means their exact location in space. Meaning, when we look at the chart here, this is their zodiacal position. As if they were all on the same orbital plane, this is what they would look like. But because there is, a slight wobble above and below the orbital plane of the Earth going around the sun and all the planets going around the sun, there's a slight wobble. You have to take into account how far away the planet is from the plane to get its exact location in space relative to the Earth at that moment. So finding the planet's exact location is the in mundo position. And when those two planets are at an angle in mundo, in space, on an angle at the same time, that's what creates the Paran. And so what we're really thinking of when we think of the Paran is two planets at a very strong point, both on an angle, coming together and creating a very strong energy between the two that sort of creates a banded effect around the globe where that energy can be felt at that latitude anywhere you go. All right, so let's go back to the map to sort of contemplate this further. All right, so here we are back at the map. So now that we kind of understand what Parans are, how they work, and how they are formed, maybe we'll kind of want to talk about now is, well, what do we do with that information? How do we interpret it? So to start, I think first we'd want to talk about their orbs of influence. So from a Paran, it's about a 1 degree orb of influence that the energy will be felt. So 1 degree is about 70 miles. So 70 miles north and 70 miles south, you would feel the influence of those energies in that location. And of course, the closer you are to the exact latitude, to that exact line, the stronger that energy will be felt. And as you move away from it, less and less so until over the 1 degree mark, it's sort of a non-factor at that point. And when you're thinking about how these Parans work, like how that energy is manifesting, so we want to look at the two planets. And, you think, well, okay, it's a conjunction of these two planets. So what is the raw potentiality of the manifestations of these planets, and what could those be? It's like their natural significations, and sort of combining what those natural significations are and seeing how they play out in a person's life. And and because of the natural significations, we're not really thinking about like how those planets are doing in the person's natal chart, like whether it's, cursed or blessed or debilitated or, all these other things. We're not so much looking at the strength and status of the planets on the Parans. It's really just the raw natural potentiality of those planetary energies. So like to sort of give an example, Sun is, it's power, it's confidence, it's bosses, it's self-expression. So it's all of those things. Uranus is freedom, it's excitement, it's cutting edge, it wants to test boundaries, those sorts of things. So what happens when you combine those two energies? Well, it's like the Sun-Uranus line. In this case, it's like a good place if you want to go sort of express your power. If you want to have that strong, cutting edge, standing out sort of vibe, that would be a good place to go. It's where you can sort of like, have a little extra genius behind the things you do. So these are the sort of the vibes of that line by combining, what those planets represent. And so like, in Tom Brady's case, if he went down here in the Caribbean somewhere, he'd probably feel a lot more of that type of energy. So as you can see, by understanding, what the Parans can do, it sort of gives you a lot of power to sort of pick and choose where you want to live from a latitudinal standpoint based off of what kind of energies you might want to experience. And it'll allow you to sort of avoid a lot of the difficult experiences and enhance a lot of the easier, more harmonious experiences at your choosing. In fact, as I'm looking at the map now, I'm seeing a very interesting Paran going through Boston, where Tom Brady played for the Patriots for so long. So I don't want this to turn into a Tom Brady case study, but I want to point this out and make note of it. Saturn, Neptune going through Boston. In fact, I'll probably put together another little video example case study on Tom Brady's locational map so I can talk about this because this is interesting. But since I don't want this video to turn into the case study itself, I'll go ahead and leave it at that and maybe link to the video in the description. But yeah, just something I've noticed while looking at this map here that would be fun to kind of expand upon. Okay, so before we wrap up, there's a couple other quick things I'd just like to point out, just so you can get to know the Parans a little better. One of them is, so even though, when we're looking at Parans, we're really only looking at, a combination of two planets at a time, a lot of times they could be cloistered together in such a way that we have to sort of integrate and combine multiple Paran influences into one interpretation for locations, and then also sort of determine the strength of them by how close they are to each one. So, like, for instance, right here, we had the Moon-Pluto Paran, but you can see on that same exact latitude, there's Pluto-Jupiter. So while in this view, we can see that how the Pluto-Moon Paran was formed right here, I mean, somewhere else on the globe at this latitude, Pluto and Jupiter were on angles together at the same time. So if Tom Brady were to be, on this latitude near this Paran, like in Denver or something, then we would have to sort of interpret how those two Parans combine and what he might experience there because of them. And then, not too far away, so this Paran is, 50 miles away from, the Ceres Jupiter Paran. And so if he were in Denver, for instance, we can actually zoom in to take a closer look. If he were in Denver, he'd be right in between, these Parans that are basically on the same latitude and this Paran here, which is only, several miles away. So when we really start diving in and looking at maps, you're going to want to have to sort of interpret how these different Parans are coming together and what sort of experiences they can create in combination. And of course, this is all in addition to what the relocation chart is doing and other factors. So, like in addition to local space lines, their natal chart, the condition of their planets, the relocation chart, and what's being activated, the Parans are just one aspect to the whole picture. And then when you start getting into certain locations where they're sort of bunched up, then we got to sort of piece together how those different Parans are all being integrated. So, these are things to keep in mind. But that being said, I also like to think of Parans as a sort of a way, almost like a cheat code, where regardless of what else is going on in your chart, you can go directly to a strong, beneficial Paran for a certain objective or goal that you might have that you're trying to reach, and experience that energy of that Paran for that purpose at any given time. So even though, you might have some other difficulties going on in the relocation chart or whatever else, by harnessing the power of various Parans to your choosing is a sort of a way to experience some beneficial planetary energies that you wouldn't necessarily be able to otherwise. All right, so there you go. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, let me know. I hope this was a good introduction for Parans, what they are and how you can use them. So in other videos, I'm going to go a little deeper into certain specific Parans and maybe do some interpretation or analysis of them, some case studies and everything else, to really dive deep and understand different Parans and how we can work with them. But in this video, I just kind of wanted to do an introduction and talk about them so we can understand them a little better moving forward. Thank you so much. Thanks for watching.